you're still watching Ways. Today is a very, very, very traumatic topic for me. Honestly, I mean, I would have taken it lightly that, okay, it's not that serious, probably because I went through female genital mutilation. Well, I call it female circumcision. But hearing all of these things that you're saying, it's just making me wonder how, you know, people actually live with this kind of pain. Because some of the people, I was just reading the research, some of the points that these people make to justify this act is that the woman has a better threshold for pain when it comes to childbearing and all of that. And most of the people that do this or perform this act on the young girls are way, way older women. You know, they don't, I mean, it's not a young person. And these things keep going from generation to generation. So if we were to curb this or to completely eradicate it, you know, who are we talking to? Are we talking to the young people or we're talking to the older women?
Okay, I think someone asked me this question about 2 days ago when I was granting an interview, and I told them categorically that FGM is not a one-sided approach, right? It's not something you have to say, okay, let's focus on Mr. A, later on we'll come back to Mr. B, or let's talk to Mr. Z, Mr. B, we can always sort them out. It's something that is holistic. The intensity with which you are talking to Mr. A must be the same intensity, probably a different strategy with which you engage in this. Because, for instance, if you are talking to the older women, are you aware that there are some women who will say, okay, this is fine, I won't do it, but because of their husband, the husband is the person that is even ensuring that this is done. So you have to, as you're talking to the woman, there has to be a way to talk to the man. As you're talking to the man, you need to talk to probably another person, the man's mother, right? So everybody is important. You need to talk to the traditional people that are, we call them custodians of custom, right? You need to talk to everybody. So nobody is more important than the other person.
Okay, so my question of, sorry, Oti, the question of criminalizing the act.
The practice, yeah.
Yes. Is there any law against it right now? So
a lot of people are beginning to come up with law. I know that Ekiti, there's something called the VAP Act, Violence Against Persons, something like that. The VAP Act is there, which people are using, which captures FGM, you know, in the law. I know about Ebonyi. Some people have passed their own Ebonyi, Ekiti,
and I hear that the child's law. Child protection law
also
actually covers child rights law actually covers
things around harmful traditional practices and all that. It didn't state specifically,
but just generalized.
Yes, to talk about harmful traditional practice, but the VAP law talks about FGM. Some people are also coming up with it, but I know that I think that it's not just about coming up with laws. You know, if laws are not enforced, it's useless, right? People can come up to put up anything for political reasons and then take all the praises and all that. But if we can't catch one person and we can say this person has been jailed for doing this, nothing will happen. But again, how can you set up a law if the people who have taken this as part of them are not telling you we are not keeping it? Which is why we must have more communities that are coming out to publicly declare. Because if a community publicly declares on that ground, you can enter into the community and look for people that are defaulting. You understand? So now, across communities as we've been working, we have trained people as community champions in the villages. So for the communities where we are working, across the country and the states that I know that I have my colleagues that are working, we have communities where people have been trained as champions, FGM champions. So those people are also being like gatekeepers, whistleblowers, trying to identify. Now, again, they are not fighting because you can't fight people away from it. It's also about dialoguing and trying to get people to understand. So we have those people. We have trained traditional rulers who will bring and sit them down and explain to them from point A to point B, and they start seeing reasons. And they also go back and start talking about it. We've had religious leaders, people that are clergies, to also start talking about this because they are also major influencers. We've had to even talk to circumcisers themselves
to abandon their practice,
however,
their means of livelihood.
Exactly. No, some of them are doing it because it's a way, not because, now, we now begin to find out that actually there was actually no basis for doing this. Because some of them, after interview, they tell you that this is how they make money. So in which case, you are actually not doing this because you want to save the girl, but you're doing this because you want to make money.
Guess what? Because I had a conversation with my mom, you know, when circumcision was happening in the 80s, it was not about money because it was really like peanuts, literally. In fact, what she was saying was that you give them snail, you give them oil, you give them like the cotton materials and, you know, and very, very tiny. So how would somebody make money off of that?
So I tell you the truth right now, a lot of people are, it's now a business making stuff for some people right now. You know, because people have to travel. Some people used to travel all the way from the city to go home to do it
and get it done.
I can't. You understand what I'm saying? So it's something that is so treasured. You understand? So
they found now that it's a viable source of income. So again, capitalism at its
exactly.
best. I was just even going to speak to the International Day of Zero Tolerance. Can you tell us a bit about that? What it stands for? Okay, the International Day of Zero Tolerance is actually a day. It's celebrated every 6th of February annually. It's a day set aside by the UN, you know, to commemorate the entire drive and push to eliminate the practice of FGM. It was actually declared by our late former First Lady, the wife of Chief Olusegun Obasanjo, Mrs. Stella Obasanjo, in 2003, during a conference of the International African Committee on the Stoppage of Harmful Traditional Practices, where she declared the entire International Day of Zero Tolerance. And after the declaration, it was now adopted by the United Nations, you know, to now be, you know, to now be an annual celebration. So ever since 2003, every year February 6th, the entire world celebrates.
So what do you do on that day?
So on that day, we have a lot of course, it's a global commemoration. So a lot of people have a lot of conversation around, you know, drive and strategies to stop the practice. All the stakeholders come out. We celebrate people that we call survivors. That will have people, you know, again, I mean, I must also have to celebrate you for even on talking media coming out to say you actually underwent this practice, because a lot of people, now that they understand that, they are not feeling like, you understand, they are not proud to now talk about it. So we are beginning to have people that are coming out to share their stories, because it is their stories and their experiences that can now either enforce what we're saying or not. When they say that it is FGM curbs promiscuity, we have a lot of people who were caught who are extremely promiscuous. So how can you now, on that ground, say this is? We have a community, a state where we have worked, where there is high rate of promiscuity. However, the girls there have about 95% of them were all caught. We've had women who were not caught, but are extremely resourceful, producing results in the society, and they are not promiscuous. All right. So how can you on the ground to say this is this? So what about the men?
My question now. My question is, why is it that it's okay to circumcise a female child? A male child, but it's not okay to cut a female child. Okay,
basically, from my own experience, I will tell you that first of all, the male external genitalia is on the external, right? Which actually puts it in a more likely position for infection and all that, which is why they have to remove the foreskin, right? For the female has no, the female genitalia is actually internal. Right? So in which case it's already kind of preserved, protected. The male child is that you have to remove the foreskin.
But I think, well, I wouldn't really, because I was saying to you guys, in Europe, for instance, you know, a lot of them, guys, I mean, men, they are not circumcised, you know. Because even when my sister had her son and she wanted to do it in hospital, they would ask you, is there any medical challenge or something? But in her mind, she's a Christian, you know, like our practice is, our faith says, you know, at least when the child is, you know,
days old.
8 days old, you go and have
the male child.
Yeah, the male child, you know, have the child circumcised. But there, you know, so she had to actually even Google and look for a Jewish rabbi that we traveled, I think, about 2 hours to get the young man circumcised and all of that. So even there, some people don't feel the need that they have to be circumcised.
So again, like I said, this is actually based on people's belief,
yes.
right? Our own, we have a strong, as Christians, we have strong backup to say from the scripture that we believe.
So where I'm going with the conversation is because, I mean, listening to my mom, it was a very strong conviction that, you know, this promiscuity thing you're talking about is a very strong conviction that they also were, it was handed down to them. That if you do not circumcise your female child, she will be all over the place, you know, jumping from one man to the other. It was very, very strong. The way we are strong about, we're convinced about having a male child circumcised is the way they feel that. So how will we be able to break that conviction? Because this is just, for me, it's a culture thing. I asked my mom, I said, if you were given a chance today, would you circumcise? She said, never, you know, because now she knows better. A lot of these people are misinformed. They don't really know. So, but what they have been taught is that, okay, I have to do this, you know, for the child to be, so the child will not be too, like her sex drive would not be too much and all of that. So how do we break that?
Okay.
I mean, would just talking be enough?
No. It's not just about talking. It's also not something you have to force, right? It's not something you have to. You don't force change.
It has to be a subtle approach.
You don't force change. And I can tell you that a lot of work is being done right now. I just listed to you a lot of people, strategic people that have been involved in this conversation. We are beginning to have policymakers who are also coming up to also lend their voices. However, I was asked the question, what do I think about the UN they've set a target to stop the practice by 2030. Do I think it's feasible?
It's feasible, yeah.
And I told them that the truth is that a goal, if you set a goal, just one goal, and give yourself 50 years to achieve it, it will be dependent on the intensity of your action. If you set a goal to achieve one task and you fold your hands for 100 years, nothing gets done. You set a goal to achieve 20 tasks and you want to achieve it, you set a timeline of 10 years and you increase the capacity of your action. You can even achieve it in less time, less than the time you set.
So sorry, let me quickly take a message from our WhatsApp platform. Somebody says, good evening, fam. Ooh, this topic is overwhelmingly disturbing in many shades. I really want to understand the process involved in women entirely changing their genitalia. What is the process like? Is it also a form of mutilation? Can we have, because we have heard cases of women who entirely change their genitalia by removing the whole female reproductive part and replacing it with a male reproductive part. What happens in this case? That's cases of transgender. Yeah.
So that's
anonymous.
What you just asked right now, you talk about removing
the entire
and then changing. That's now a choice issue.
Yeah.
You understand? That's now a different conversation altogether. It's not something we can. It's a choice thing that somebody just wakes up and say, I don't want to be a woman again. No, I want to be a man. It's a different conversation here. But then,
and the person is doing it as an adult.
Exactly. So that one is not a problem. This other one we're talking about is that in most cases, it's been done on a child who has no right to choose.
My question now is, over the years, is there any reduction? Do you think it's reduced and the rate is reducing? Or is there a surge?
Again, I think people are becoming more aware, right? People are becoming more aware that this is a challenge. People are becoming more aware that even though it's a culture that the forefathers, the foremothers, the ancestors passed across to them, they're beginning to see the thin lines, the connections to a lot of things, because there are more very sensitive things, more important things to discuss in today's world than a lot of archaic belief system that people, think about. Because coming to think of it, I'll come back to your question in terms of if I think that there is an awareness. But then the challenge is that if we understand the effect it has on ladies, right? Because if you are not directly affected, you are indirectly affected. It can be your friend, it can be your wife, it can be your colleague somewhere. And if somebody like that in the workplace, or if he is a colleague suffering from trauma or shock, or each time the person remembers it, the person jacks up and productivity reduces, it affects you that is working, and you may not understand what the person is passing through. So back to your question, I think that a lot of work has been done. More people are getting more aware. In fact, in one of the work that I do is that I'm working with UNICEF End Cutting on the UNICEF End Cutting Girls campaign to also use social media to come up with this conversation. Yeah. Yes, so people are becoming more aware, and we are also hoping that they are not just aware, they're beginning to also take decisions.
Okay, so there's somebody out there right now saying to themselves, I want to get involved. How can I also be part of this campaign to raise the awareness and stop it? So what can they do? What is available for them? Where can they engage in all of that?
So the issue of FGM is online. The person can join so every Thursday, for instance, we have a platform where we get to discuss for the past it's over 3-4 years now, every Thursday back to back, and then every Tuesday we'll get to do, I think once in a month, but I know of Thursdays where we'll get to do conversation on Twitter around female genital mutilation with the hashtag #EndCuttingGirls. It happens every. So all the young people who want to add their voice gets to be part of that conversation where we'll talk about different, areas where this is happening. And from there, people can start getting aware and also start educating people around them to say this is not good and this is good. But again, we need a lot of young people now, just like you said sometime, when we went on break, that how did you put it again? You talked about young people, because
young people,
exactly, because our ancestors who brought this don't understand where the world is going right now, So, and young people, they will soon get married, they will soon give birth to children, they will soon do all those things. And as we are coming up, we need to start changing the narrative from bottom-top approach, and there's nothing we can do with the parents. I can't go to my great-grandmother, my grandmother who is still alive.
She's like dry fish.
You understand? And sit her down. She will not understand if I say mutilation.
She doesn't even understand the word.
How do you even want to start that conversation with her? How do you want to start telling her that even something that when she has not even started thinking about getting married, that they have been doing, that you're now coming to tell her because you went to one school and then open book. So it has to be young people coming up with the conversation, because if we are not directly affected, we are indirectly affected.
Well, can I go for another question?
No, you cannot. Sadly, we've run out of time, but I want to say a big thank you. And I think for us, we might end up adopting this as one of our projects as well here on the show, because we are women. I'm happy to share my own story, but I really don't have a traumatic story like the woman. But we're women here. We'll continue to push for it, and hopefully we'll be able to get more people to join us on this course, because it's actually a fantastic thing to end, judging by this explanation.
I was just going to ask if so I know there's a hashtag if we want to continue the conversation.
Yeah, it's just End Cutting.
Yeah, we have End Cutting Girls, we have End FGM, we have Youth End FGM.
All right, thank you so much, Mr. Raymond Okpani. Thank you so much. I've really been educated this evening. All right, so catch us live every weekend from Fridays to Sundays at 8 p.m. as we bring thought-provoking, engaging and informative conversations to your screen. Now, in case you missed today's quote, here it is again. We are human beings. We make traditions, so we should have the right to choose those traditions. That's from Malala. So enjoy the rest of your evening. Ladies, you've had a very good, it's a very calm show today. Thank you. Very traumatic, but we thank God that, we'll get more voices heard. Thank you so much, Raymond. All right, have a lovely evening.
Thank you.